We're gonna go ahead and get started. So you three are very lucky to be part of this amazing reflection today. So very excited to have you all here for today's event that focuses on the realities of international research. And this event will feature a panel of faculty and students who have participated in the Institute for Integrative Conservation's year-long conservation research program. And so we'll be sort of centering our discussion around that research program that's centered on conservation. But a lot of what you'll be hearing today and we'll be discussing today would be relevant to international research, really in any topic. So thank you all for coming. My name is Erica Garut. I'm the Director of Research, and I am very lucky that I get to work with my students and faculty and external conservation partners to find ways that we can work together on applied research here in Virginia, all over the US and all over the world, that really enables us to help support these conservation partners with advancing conservation solutions. So if you're interested in the conservation research program, please check out the IIC website. That is where the application is housed, as well as a description of the 2026 projects that we'll be supporting. And there's also information about the program on the website. If you have any questions as you're working on your applications, you can reach out to me and the Director of Research, Kathy Francillo, who's here, who oversees all of the operations and logistics for the program. Can answer any questions you might have about the awards or all the logistics that go into traveling internationally. Or Dr. Richard Boyachi, who's one of our panelists today too, who's our research program manager, who really determined contact for the program in 2026. Also this year, we've been partnering with Andrew Martin from the Career Development and Professional Engagement Office, as well as Lori Jacobson from the Education Center. They have provided some amazing resources that you'll see on our website, helping students think through how to prepare applications, sort of demonstrate your interest and your unique contributions to conservation. So how to, as you're preparing your applications, please check out those resources. Also today, this event is part of a William and Mary International Career Series. So if you guys don't mind with your phones, just scan this QR code and sign in, because we're trying to capture all the students that are participating in these events that are focused on international career. I'll come back to it at the end too. So you're all here because you probably recognize that in an increasingly interconnected world, it's important for all of us to reflect, understand our own position in the world, show respect and learn from other communities, and build on our perspectives. Because we're so interconnected that nobody on Earth would really independently without affecting other people, other environments. So having a global perspective really is the ability to think beyond your own context, to consider the implications of your decisions or actions, and how they might influence other people, cultures, or environments. And it's also the practice of self-reflection on what factors sort of shape our view of the world, our knowledge, and openness and eagerness to learn from different perspectives and knowledge systems. And it's really an intentional practice of understanding own position and the positions that other people. So it's really an opportunity not only to learn and to get to experience and make connections with people who come from different backgrounds from us, but it's also a practice for us to learn about ourselves. And this is a crucial practice for leaders who want to navigate the complex and dynamic challenges today. We're specifically talking about why having that global perspective is important for complex conservation challenges, but obviously it's important for just interacting in our world today. So it's through this international experience that we have the unique opportunity to see our own home, our own culture, and ourselves in a new way. So we are all very privileged to be here at William & Mary and to have such amazing opportunities to get to travel internationally and get to connect with communities all over the world. Here at the IIC, we're very lucky that all of the projects that students are a part of are projects that international conservation partners have invited us to be a part of, which is an incredible privilege to be invited to come and learn and join these partners in the work that they're doing. And it is through the partnerships that we have an opportunity to learn and to bring perspectives into our learning experience here at William & Mary. But it's also through that invitation and that partnership that we get to come alongside those partners and help address complex conservation challenges. So the IIC is committed to that self-reflection. So all of the faculty and partners and students who are involved in the conservation research program try to cultivate that sort of practice of self-reflection and respect and responsibility that comes with this incredible privilege of getting to learn and build relationships with national communities. And the reason we do that is because conservation challenges are complex. So we know that in order to solve these challenges that affect us all, we need to come together. We need to bring people from different backgrounds with different knowledge, with different systems together to help solve these challenges. So the IIC, Institute for Integrative Conservation, we were established in January of 2020 with that mission to bring together diverse communities of students from across the various schools and departments here at William & Mary, as well as faculty from across various schools and departments, and external conservation partners to work together to deliver integrative solutions to these most pressing conservation challenges. And we do that in several ways. We, through our research program, try to, together with our partners, tackle real conservation challenges. So we, every spring, ask conservation partners to submit proposals for research projects that they would like students and faculty to work on. And then those partners are the ones driving the direction of the research that students are a part of. And that's important because we want the research that we're doing to be useful and applied to the work. We also intentionally build interdisciplinary and multicultural teams to tackle these projects. And that's because we recognize that to solve conservation challenges, we not only need biologists in the room, but we also need history majors, art majors, data scientists, chemists who can all work together to tackle these challenges from different disciplinary perspectives. We also need people coming from different backgrounds with different knowledge systems from different cultures who can help tackle these challenges as well. So students who are part of these projects are part of these amazing disciplinary and cultural teams. And it is through sort of bringing together these multicultural teams that we can then address these conservation challenges from an integrative lens. Really thinking about not only the environmental side of all these challenges, but also importantly, the human side of all of the challenges. So the objectives of the research program are to, one, support conservation partners with applied research that's designed to advance their conservation goals. And then also through participation in research, our goal is to nurture a diverse generation of innovative, principled, compassionate, and self-aware leaders. So that would be our students who are involved in research. And I want to mention that in our projects, as you'll hear from our panelists today, we don't just involve William & Mary students, we also bring in students from local universities that are associated with the conservation organizations that we work with, for the very reason that we're trying to bring together students who can tackle these challenges together. So today you'll hear about some of the interactions that the panelists have had with local students as well who have been part of these teams. So the 2026 Conservation Research Program application is now open. The applications are due October 25th, so next Saturday. Don't stress out, it's not too bad. You have to submit a resume, cover letter, and a short 1-minute video that emphasizes your enthusiasm for the program. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me or Richard. But if you go to our website, there's a lot of information on how to apply. And you'll see on the website the general schedule. It's a year-long program. So in the spring, you register for 2 credits to work on a proposal. Over the summer, you receive a $4,000 research full-time. For many of the projects, that involves international travel, which is what we're talking about today. And then in the fall semester, students come back and for 2 credits of independent research, write up a report. There is an opportunity if you are selected for one of the international projects. If you need additional support beyond the $4,000 award for travel expenses, there's another process that you can go through to apply for additional travel support the IIC for flights or. The requirement is that students who are selected for this project commit to the full year-long program, that they work hard to make sure that their project meets the needs of the partners, that they complete all the deliverables for the partners, including a report or presentation and other deliverables for the partner. And as we're going to be talking about today, it's a requirement that students practice self-reflection and demonstrate cultural sensitivity, humility, and a willingness to learn. And then students are also responsible, as you'll hear today from the panelist, of working closely with Richard, as well as your conservation partners, on coming up with a travel plan, working through all of the preparation and logistics that need to be completed before travel, developing a budget, coming up with a plan for how you're going to manage your health and safety, and then making sure that you can follow all of those plans throughout the summer, staying in close contact with Richard and your partners. And so the benefits, obviously, you get this amazing experience doing research, getting to learn from your fellow researchers and faculty mentors, as well as your partners. But you also receive the $4,000 award that supports your work full time over the summer, 2 independent research credits within the spring and the fall, and then you get to build up your research and professional skills, and an opportunity if you think you might want to do research or work internationally later in life. This is a really great opportunity to build up some of those skills because you're invited by these partners and skills. So the travel, as you all have probably looked at the 2026 projects, not all projects require travel. There are projects that are done remotely here from William & Mary, or in some cases students do them summer. There are projects that travel here locally in Williamsburg and in Northern Virginia. There are projects that travel domestically, and then there are several projects that travel internationally. So today we're talking a lot about that. For all of these projects, the conditions, the travel are going to vary by project. Some of them, you'll be staying in more remote field research stations. So you'll hear about that, I think, today from Leah, where you're camping, there's limited resources, you're doing, you're in a very isolated setting. In some projects you're going to be staying in, hotels or nicer sort of field stations. And some you'll be staying, mostly in hotels and in similar areas where similar to you all work closely with Richard and the partners in the spring semester to work on a budget, and then you're responsible for managing that budget summer. In many cases, the partner organizations are covering a lot of your logistics and expenses, so it's your responsibility to make sure that you know what you're responsible for and that you have a plan for covering those expenses. So just briefly, we have several projects that require either no travel or just domestic travel in 2026. And then we have many projects that require international travel. So we have students going summer to Kenya. Leah went to South Africa, Ecuador, to Argentina, to Mexico. And so if you have any questions about any of these, we can talk a little bit. The deadline for the application is October 25th. Again, please check out the website. Feel free to email me or Richard if you have any questions. And the general process is that once you submit your application, the next step will be that you'll be contacted for a very short faculty mentors. And that's a good opportunity for you to ask more detailed questions about projects. And then you'll be notified right before Thanksgiving, whether you were matched with the project or not. And then after Thanksgiving, you'll make sure that you have all of your paperwork in so that you're ready to go in January. All right, so that's my spiel. We're now going to hand it over to the panelists. So today these panelists are going to talk a little bit about the realities of doing international research. If you haven't done international research before, I know for me, when I was a student, I hadn't been on an international trip. I thought, oh, this is going to be so neat. It's going to be like a luxury like safari or something that I've seen on the news, and then you get there and you realize that is not at all what it is like. So I'm excited for our panelists to reflect on what it was like. So I'm going to first start by asking the panelists to just briefly introduce themselves and then talk a little bit about the research they do and where they travel.
Hello everyone, thank you for being here. I am Sapna Lohani. I'm a geospatial data scientist here at the Institute for Integrative Conservation. So I'm a representative of the faculty mentor for all these projects that we're looking into. This year, I think I'm one of those who has most of the international projects. This year, I'm mentoring the Nepal project. I'm mentoring the Uganda project. And I also had a project in Philippines. I'm a geospatial scientist, so I use spatial analysis, a software called GIS. So if any projects has a GIS component to it, I kind of get connected. And the conservation topic I'm very much interested is a conflict between humans and resources. So if there is a conflict, a component to the project, I get excited and I get connected to that project. Apart from that, I'm from Nepal and I do have a couple of projects now from Nepal where the students had traveled to Nepal before. One of them was related to water, where we were looking at the riparian communities, how they get dependent on water and due to different changes, how their life gets affected. Then I was a part of that project where Lauren is going to talk about, which is about women's security in water issues. And also I have a carnivore conflict project where we were looking in Nepal last year about the human and carnivore conflict in a remote area in Nepal. And this year, actually, Erica and I traveled in summer. We drove from a road trip from Colorado to Montana, where the students and our Nepali partners were talking to different organizations and agencies and ranchers about their experience on human carnivore conflict in the Western US. So, brief summary of what I do.
Thank you very much, Erica. Hi, everyone. So my name is Richard Timfi Buache. So I recently assumed the position of research programs manager. Of course, it came to me as very exciting, and I'm looking forward to contributing to the already wonderful work that IIC has been doing. I come from Ghana. Just to tell you that the last time you ate chocolate, you probably ate a product that came from Ghana, because Ghana accounts for 20% of cocoa beans that give you chocolate. And of course, it's been affecting the environment. So I'm inclined to looking at work that relates to land use change, on conservation. In terms of my research and professional background, it spans across conservation, agriculture, and livelihood. So I have a passion about how we can ensure that biodiversity conservation are in consonance with livelihood. In terms of work I've done research both in Ghana and in Ireland. So over the years, but I didn't start my career as a researcher. I first started my work living and working in conservation area, where we use a community-based approach for nature conservation. I was involved with work related to human-wildlife conflict. I live in a place where the local people were always at the ground side of crop raiding. So that's where I started from. But you see, whilst I was living there and working over there, then I began to wonder, how can science play a role in addressing all the challenges? And that is what shifted me into research. So I've had opportunity to look at land use effect on biodiversity, try to also undertake work related PhD. I had opportunity to mentor students. So that passion is also in there, and that is what brought me here. And I'm hoping that for those that are going to apply and become successful, we're hoping that we can do a very wonderful work as we address conservation issues. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Leah. I'm a junior and biology and data science major here. Still in the program in the last half of it now. And over the summer, I went to southern Kenya, Amboseli on the border with Tanzania. And our project was exploring rangeland monitoring in the area. So we interviewed a lot of Maasai people. And they have pastoralist livelihoods, so traditionally own a lot of cattle and rotate them on the rangelands there. And so we were looking at how this management of rangelands is managed, because it's very important that the grass is healthy, the cows are healthy, the people are healthy. And looking at especially how this has changed with drought, with the formalization of grazing committees and whose job it is to rotate the cows and manage the community. So it was a lot of interviews and talking to people about the cattle in the grass and the land.
Hi, I'm Sarah Shah, and I was on a One Health based project in Uganda. So we traveled to Windy Impenetrable National Park, which is in southwestern Uganda. And it is home to about half of the remaining mountain gorillas, which are, well, they were endangered. I think they're recovering now, but. And it was, we were looking at waterborne disease transmission between humans and gorillas and livestock, because one of the major threats to the gorillas is that they can get diseases from humans and they can die from them. So we focused on Cryptosporidium, which is a waterborne disease, and we took fecal samples from the gorillas and the livestock, and we analyzed those for Cryptosporidium. And we also did the same with water samples from shared water sources. And we also went out into the community to do community surveys, and we were trying to gauge community water usage and water insecurity and kind of perceptions around water contamination to identify the shared water sources, and then kind of how we can mitigate those. And so now in the analysis phase, we're kind of hoping to determine areas of increased risk for transmission and maybe communities or villages or gorilla groups that are more apt to be interfacing with each other and have that increased risk.
I'm Lauren. I'm a senior and majoring in government and environmental science. And this summer I traveled to Nepal for a research project. Our project is looking at how climate change, groundwater extraction in the Kathmandu Valley are impacting water insecurity and also gender equality. Historically, women have been like the main person in the household who manages water and like a lot of communities. And so as a result are the most impacted by water scarcity when it does happen. So we're trying to like get more of a community perspective through interviews of key informants from the government, private sector, water user committees, and also through interviews with community members, just in general from a few different areas in the valley to understand how communities are specifically being impacted and if they are seeing like changes in their water insecurity and like more.
I want to start with a couple of questions on and Richard around sort of framing our role as researchers. And then we'll end with a bunch of questions for the student panelists around what it was like to prepare travel, what it was like when they arrived, what it was like to do. So starting with Hannah and Richard, can you reflect a little bit on the self-reflection required of being a national researcher? And when you're conducting research specifically in a culture that's maybe different from your own, and how you navigate power dynamics that are often at play between researchers maybe that of the funding or that are coming from you're coming internationally, how you sort of navigate those power dynamics to make sure that the work you're doing is respectful and inclusive of all people. So a long question, but how do you start?
Thank you for the question. I think it's a very heavy question too. I'm international here too. So going to another place which is international, and to be honest, I started it from my own country, but I have not even traveled to all the places in the country. So everything is international, everything is different. The communities that we work with are different, which I have never seen. So the first thing that I self-reflect myself we are going to their place. So we are invading their place, their privacy, their resource. So we are going there to learn, not to help. We have been trying to avoid using this word help because I'm not helping them with anything. Actually, they are helping with us with the knowledge that they have. So that is the first self-reflection that I start with whenever I start with any international project, that I'm learning from this experience. And I'm a geospatial scientist, I'm a geographer. Everything is place-based. I know the solutions are to be different. There is no one-size-fits-all solution for these conservation issues. This has to be very specific to the places. But the way we look at these issues are going to be very general. So there is always a conflict. There is always someone doesn't feel like that they are heard. So there is always a little bit of power dynamics, which we are going to touch upon next. And when I'm looking at it from the faculty perspective, I think from their perspective, we look like we are going there as scientists trying to teach them something, but it's not. Actually, the power dynamics is a different way. We are going there as someone who are trying to learn. So having that humility really, really helps. And another thing I just wanted to quickly add to it is we feel that we are doing a research. We start with thinking that we are going to change the world, but we are just going to do a very small part of the work. But that work is a large thing for the communities who are there. So, and I went around the bush. We start big, we do small, but it is a big thing for the communities too. So we have to think from their perspective, put ourselves on their shoes, and think from their perspective a lot when we are thinking about the power dynamics. When we're working in international research is my.
Thank you very much. So reflecting on my position as a researcher, first thing that comes to mind is that first I see myself as an expert, but that is where you got to be very smart, because even though you are an expert, the information and the data you want, you're going to get it from the people you are going to meet. So reflecting on this, I always try to see the community I'm going to deal with as partners. They may not have the capacity that I have. They may not have the knowledge and everything I have. However, every information that I want at that material moment, I'm going to get it from them or from that place. And so it is important for me to first of all see the people as in quote partners, so that I will be able to gather every information that I want. But beyond that, I also ensure that I find a way to connect with the people. Usually when you want to travel, you go through a few things like logistics, all other things, permits and everything. But one thing I always reflect on is that you also need that social alliances. When you get to a place and they don't accept you or they don't welcome you, in fact, when you talk to them, they can't give you the information that you want. And that is what I call social alliances. So you find a way to, I find a way to connect with them, so that if it has to do like interview, they take you to places that you can get all that you want, then I can be able to extract. I remember I had to go to the northern part of Ghana to undertake a study at Aran Mole National Park. You see, so when you go to Ghana, the tribes at the southern part are entirely different from the north, the way they speak and other things. One thing I did was to try to be close to somebody that was popular and everybody knew, so that the people easily identify me through the person that is there. So it helps a lot. Of course, traveling to Ghana to Ireland to undertake research was also an entirely different thing. The first thing that I tried to do was to try to understand, the regulations, so that you'll be able to, pass through. When it comes to the power dynamics and you are dealing with local people, like you traveling to maybe Kenya, the first thing that people want to know is, that are you transparent with what you are doing? So for instance, in going to rural parts in Ghana, I try to engage the people to fully understand the kind of data I want from them. everything is transparent. I try to organize meeting with them, share with them where I'm coming from, the information that I want from them, what I intend to do. In so doing, I don't end up maybe having a challenge or problem with the local people. And that is how I have been able to deal when it comes to navigating the structures in typical local people. You see, back in Ghana and some of the typical rural communities, they are so suspicious when you come around to talk to them. So it is important that you ensure that everything is what? So transparent when dealing with them. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Summarize, so takeaways is approaching it as a learner. You're coming to learn, respect the knowledge that your communities or partners or your partners in this learning adventure have, and that transparency around why you're there, what to do together. One thing I want to mention is that obviously as we're going through the process of selecting projects, as I mentioned earlier, all of the projects come to us because the partners that they want to do, they've invited us to be a part. But there's a lot of work that goes on before the students even begin the projects, but also in the spring semester, as we, with transparency, work with the partners to ensure that the factors that are involved in the research want to be involved and make sure that they give permission and that we go through all of the permitting processes, which I can tell you a lot about, and all of the subjects reviews, everything we need to do to make sure that we're respectful and transparent and doing everything, all of our research in an ethical way and in a way that respects what the community and what they want to share. How do you practice for Richard and Sapana and then? So how do you then practice that humility and gratitude and self-reflection required to approach research in that way? And in some ways, how have you approached the unlearning that has to happen? That sometimes, because if we've grown up in a certain way where things are familiar to us, whether it's the food or the living conditions or the transportation, and you go to a new place, it's the way that you've learned and lived your life, you might think this is different than the way that I'm used to things, and not worse, but different. But that requires that unlearning and that reflection. So how do you practice that? And then keep practicing it when you're traveling.
I'm going to start, and after this, I'm going to leave because I have to be in another talk right now. I think already Richard said the key word, it's the respect. We have to start with respecting whoever is in front of us and a lot of listening ears, because we are going to a new place which we don't know anything about, the culture, the food. Yes, we are told that we have to open to accept everything, which is not easy. So the best thing that has worked for me so far is to listen. And as a faculty mentor also in these projects, I feel like my role is more about that facilitator rather than the research, because these are student-led research. You guys are smart enough to do the research, and I have work with so many smart students here. My role here is to make sure that the students are heard, the partners are heard, and our commitment from IIC is also heard. So to balance that listening ears from all the three sides, I think is the key word till now. That this is my third year. Now it's going to be fourth year that I'll be working with the projects. I have also evolved over time. So the first year I might have looked at it from a very different perspective, but now I feel we need to have a lot of listening ears and a lot of time actually when we are working with the communities. You have to listen to them. Sometimes the stories, it has nothing to do with the research that you are actually working on, but to maintain that connectedness or the mutual respect, to make sure that they trust you to tell whatever story they want to tell us. They have the knowledge, the traditional knowledge, the local knowledge is far beyond than the scientific knowledge we are trying to share. So for them to have that comfort to share their knowledge with us, we have to give them our listening ears. I'm sorry I have to leave, but I'll come back. I'll come back for the networking session.
But thank you for sharing your.
Yes, thank you very much. So along that line, one key thing is to, I try always to find a way to connect with the people. You see, different cultures and different countries and what they accept and do not accept. And so trying to get an advanced knowledge of what is acceptable and what is not acceptable is very crucial. For instance, and I'll just use this analogy and just take you back to Ghana. Over here, it is okay to give things with your left hand. Nobody has a problem. But you see, when you get to northern part of Ghana and you meet some of the elderly local people and you reach out to give something with your left hand, that will be deemed disrespect. Totally. And so what I always try to do is to try to get advanced knowledge of the local people. Elsewhere, people would read like Northern Ghana, you have to bow. You have to bow. And just by doing that, the people just accept you. You are not necessarily going to eat what they eat, but you identify some key things that are simple for you to do. And then you do, and then you are just one of them, and then you get going. So these are a few things when it comes to maybe working and kind of being able to really get what you want, which in itself is a way of kind of showing respect to the local people. And then you can be able to gather every information that you want. I believe that as researchers, we have a key role to be able to get to them and be able to elevate the challenges that they have. Clearly, there are so many things they go through. And once we get there and we go through the process, we'll be able to identify them and we'll be able to flag it for people and the rest of the world to know that this is happening over here. And it starts by making sure that you can be able to connect with the people and gather it and be able to bring it out. Thank you.
I want to open up to Lauren, if you want to reflect on this topic. So how did you reflect on your own position as a student researcher in these projects? How did you approach sort of your position working with communities?
Yeah, I think I really loved what Sapana said about coming in as a learner. I think as we continued with research, it really helped at the beginning of all our interviews to really come in with the transparency of who we are and why we're here, because we also got a lot of questions of like, why are you here? And at first it was kind of something I felt like I had to be defensive about, but really, as we interviewed more people, they said, a lot of researchers have come in through here and we haven't always seen results. We haven't always heard back. And it's not always just like information. Let's just say sometimes it's just there's no communication of why people are there. And so I think just recognizing that we're students of learning and that transparency is very important as a student. And then also just understanding that it is such a privilege to have an education here. It's a privilege to even be able to travel internationally and get a visa. A lot of just like casually, not even in interviews, but people Kenyans that we talk to, like it's much harder to get a visa into the United States. So that privilege to even be able to go there is very important. So just remembering when you're talking to people, when you're coming up with solutions for conservation challenges, that it's what we're used to might not be applicable. I think one example is some of our research was about invasive species, and there was one that we were being told about that was just kind of in a lot of places. And I think my research partner immediate thought was like, okay, let's look into this and how we can kind of like try to get rid of it, try to get native grasses back. But then we talked more, and the people we were interviewing were saying it's actually a great nutrition source. All the children like get after school and eat it, and it's kind of essential now, even though it's like being introduced. And so like here we have the privilege of, or I guess I don't really think about like invasive species as being a nutritional almost necessity. It's just kind of something that we always assume is negative. But in different contexts, just remembering that it's there's different contexts for different things, and not always coming in with your idea of invasive species that was bad or whatever you might have been used to in the US. I don't know if that answered the question.
That was a great.
Yeah, I definitely reiterate everything that everyone has said so far. But also to add on is that I think it's also super important, kind of similar to what Richard was saying, but for you to make an effort to get to know the people and the culture and make an effort to try to integrate yourself into the community as best you can. Because it's pretty easy to kind of, or at least on my project, like it would have been easy for me to, we would go out in the community and do our surveys. And then you could just go back to the place we were staying and you didn't really have to interact with people that much. But we did not do that, and we tried to be out in the community as much as possible, just not even related to our research. Sometimes if we have free time, we go out and do things with the help and approval of our partner organization. But, and I also think, like, I was there for a long time, and so my partner and I, we tried to kind of learn the local language. And sometimes we would try to speak it with community people, and they loved it. They loved to hear us making an effort, trying to get to know their culture and community. And I think that was super helpful in the building connection piece. And then also, I think kind of more on the privilege, I would say that it's important to recognize that, you know, a lot of it is partly William and Mary, like, and this program is really amazing. And then also, I think the partner organizations are also really amazing in that, because they are also helping us to have this experience as much as we're kind of helping them do the research. So like recognizing that they are also providing an experience for us to go there and to work with them. It's also
A lot of what I will say will definitely echo what people said too, but I think a couple of the main things I would say to come in with, one is like curiosity, and that like you want to hear like what these communities have to tell you and learn from them and their experiences. Like again, you had said earlier, and at the end of the day, like they're the ones who are supporting you and helping you project. So I think also just like being open to like asking questions, trying to learn more about them, trying to learn more about the researchers you're working with, so that you are like getting in and like kind of learning how to assimilate properly as well. I think that was helpful for me to like ask respectful questions to make sure that I was like doing things properly and learning as much as I could about the community I was working with. I also think having an open mind and being try new things, try new foods, try new activities that maybe you wouldn't be as comfortable with. I mean, this is a very minor example, but I'm not a big yogurt eater at home. And like the first day, the girls like took me to like try yogurt, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna try it. Like, why not? It might be different here. And I honestly liked it way more in Nepal. So like, it's just small things like that where it's a conscientious effort to be respectful and polite and like try new things, and that also helps you like learn more and be more part of that culture at the same time. So I definitely benefited from that as well. And I also do agree, like learning a bit before you head over somewhere international is really important. Like I definitely researched a few things, and like I learned that maybe pointing like that isn't really appropriate. Try to go more like that when you're pointing to things, or saying namaste is typically how people would say hello. And everyone did that when I was there. So then it was actually good to like be familiar with that already. And even just picking up a few words like in that language, like Danyabad being thank you, like that's a great word to know. And then I could say it to people after interviews and polite and respectful. And so I think it's just important to take that time both before and while you're there to really familiarize yourself with the community, so that you aren't like posing like a negative presence or kind of like intervening too much. You want to assimilate properly.
I think you can probably pretty good. It's really important to do this as much preparation as you can, but when you get there, especially when you first arrive, that first week is really hard because everything's new. The language is different in a lot of cases, culture is different, the transportation's different. You don't really know what your research is really going to be. You're learning about the partner organizations. Everything is different. You all reflect on what that was like first arrived in that first week of how did you sort of take care of yourself and handle the flexibility required of coming into a new culture in a new situation, not really what to do or what was next and then approaching that from a thoughtful, respectful way, acknowledging that it will all work out as it did for all three. of you. And can you reflect on that, how hard it is at the beginning and how you got through that? Well, it wasn't hard for you, you can say that I felt on that, but it's hard, I think, for anyone traveling. And
Yeah, it was definitely a little scary at first because everything was so new. And I had tried to Duolingo a little bit of Swahili before getting there, but I think all I learned was like I'm American and that was probably painfully obvious anyway. So I think the first week just actually like really making an effort to learn the language was very helpful. Thank you and hello were essential. And just talking to people, having an open mind, not being afraid to ask questions. I think what makes it easier to adjust, at least for me, was just trying to like actually spend time with the people that were around at the, it was kind of like we were interns staying at, like we were like eating and sleeping there and there was a chef. So there were a lot of people around during the day, especially the weekdays, and just trying as best as possible to spend a lot of time around them. I mean, love tea and talking and taking breaks during the day. So it was really nice to just ask questions. I think I felt immediately more comfortable when I started to know names and faces, and I wasn't like so worried about like what people will think and all this stuff. Like I actually like knowing people, I think was what helped me adjust the most overall to the and like yeah, I have so many great memories. The soccer after a lot of days, I still have WhatsApp texts with a lot of the people I met. So I think yeah, that first week just making your best effort to meet people you're gonna be around that are a part of the culture and community where you're staying is what interests me.
Yeah, I do think the first little bit is hard, and for me, it was like a little bit delayed because the first week was honestly super fun, and we had one of our other faculty mentors was there with us, and he spends a lot of time in Kenya, so he's super kind of well versed in the culture, and he lived in Uganda for a little bit. And so he was very helpful in kind of integrating us and showing us the culture and helping to teach us. But then he left, and then it was just me and Helen, and then the rest of the Ugandan team. And I think for me, like that was kind of when it set in more, because it was kind of just like fun getting used to everything for that. But then we actually got into the research and just us, and we then kind of had to get used to things on a more regular basis, because that was where we were going to be spending the next 2 months almost. So it was kind of hard to adjust, but I agree with what Leah said, because I think what kind of made a difference for me was when I got to know everyone else, because it feels less alone, obviously, when you know everyone else. And I didn't even really know Helen that well, because we had worked together obviously in the spring semester, but we had not really interacted outside of CRP stuff. So, I got to know her better and the rest of the team better. And that really made such a big difference, because it was then I was like living with a bunch of friends. And so it was a lot more fun, and that was.
I was definitely nervous at first, and I could say this is my first like international experience, so I don't even think I fully prepared myself for the flight. It was it was long, and I definitely didn't sleep as much as I did, so maybe it was like in a little bit of an irrational headspace when we landed, and had, like a moment of freaking out. But I did call my parents, and then also my mentor came over and like talked with both of us, and it was really nice to like see him and put a like a face to like the name, because I had talked to him on like teams a lot in the spring semester, but actually getting to like see him and like talk with him like that and just like talking to my parents like calmed me down immediately. And then I slept, which I think that was what the missing factor was, if anything. And the next day I woke up and I was like, oh, the sun's out. I feel so much better. And then just getting to actually meet the team I was working with and like seeing the girls, Vegeta, Melanie, and Diksha, who I was supposed to work with, like, and getting dinner with them was such a blast. And they were just so funny and fun and light and sweet. And I just immediately was like, okay, I think I can, I think this is gonna work out and I'm gonna have fun. And I think once we also just had like more of a schedule and a routine of research, I felt like, oh, this is so fun. Like I know what I'm doing. I'm glad like I know what I'm here for. And I'm the type of person who really likes to have like a set routine. So it ended up working out after that. But definitely took like a moment the first few days for sure to like settle in, get used to like certain things like we had to like kind of avoid eating like more raw foods, being careful of like eating vegetables or anything like that, and then getting used to like boiling water. But once you like spend the first couple of days adjusting, it's so easy. It just becomes kind of like this is my life now. Like I know what I'm doing and I feel so I'll patch on very quick.
Process, could the three of you reflect on what you did to prepare these three semester related to visas, flights, thinking through health and safety, budgets, and then what it was like when you got there? I want to emphasize that you have a lot of support. The partners that Sergio was mentioning are creating this amazing experience for you. Spend a ton of time and energy making sure that your logistics are arranged and that you're healthy and safe and that you're in a good situation. So it's not you going alone to Uganda and scheduling everything, doing everything yourself. So can you maybe reflect on what that process was like, prepared for, and then maybe things maybe you didn't anticipate that?
I think for the like general safety things, I'm so happy the IIC is so incredible because all of that was like, really made sure I was okay. Got some vaccines, just logistically visa, did the research on what was needed to travel, that's for all that stuff. So, I mean, it's definitely, stuff you have to do, but the IIC is great at making sure it all gets done. And don't be afraid about the budget stuff with international travel. The ICO is also, will cover flights and stuff like that. It's fairly simple, so that shouldn't be a concern if you're considering like to get some international. And then I think the biggest thing that kind of helped was doing some research into the cultural context of the area that wasn't necessarily related to, well, it is related to the research you're doing there too, but you don't always realize it at first. But like just learning about the history of subdivision of the land and colonization and what has happened in history in Kenya. It became important while we were doing research, and it kind of just helped put everything into a context that made sense when we were interacting, driving, and seeing everything and talking to people. So I'd say doing your research just on the area is super important. I think that was the biggest thing that helped, and also just really helped us understand how to ask questions and how to interpret answers to questions during our interviews. Like I said, language, you'll probably learn a lot there, but a little preparation never hurt for that. Yeah.
Yeah, for my project, the preparation. Aside from the basics of flights and visas, those were all pretty easy. The visa was surprisingly easy, but my project had a lot of paperwork and research approvals and stuff, but I won't like go into that because it's not super relevant to those projects, I think, but and then in terms of health and safety, I think like don't be surprised if for most of the spring semester you don't really know like what it will be like when you get there, because I remember I had very little information for most of the semester, but then towards the end we had like a few big meetings with like everyone from our organization, and they gave us like all the details, and it was great because then, you know, I knew a lot more about it and we could ask questions and everything. Which was super nice to kind of know what it was gonna be like. We had like a few pictures even of the place. And then I tried to do research a little bit of the area, but it was kind of difficult because like it's really rural and there's a lot of different tribes in Uganda that are all very different and so it's kind of difficult to find information on specific area I was going. So I would say that when you get there, like it's okay if you don't really have a great background or understanding. But then I think it's just all the more important that you talk to people and talk to your organization and we worked with 2 local students from Ugandan university and so that was super helpful because Helen and I could talk to them constantly about the culture and just the place. And yeah, and so I would say that, you know, it's okay to not know everything going into it and it's also okay to, because you probably won't, you're not gonna be fully just prepare as much as possible, but when you get there, it's different, but it will all work out.
Yeah, I would agree with something like research and planning on the front end, and I also had to do like the IRB approvals, like that's. I won't even get into either, but like I think spreadsheets were definitely very helpful. I think they helped me stay organized. So like I had one for like budgeting and like also function as my packing list. So like I knew which items to bring with me in terms of like medications, clothes. But just I noted that I had to get a visa while there on there just to make sure that I set out money for that too. And I also think if you're getting a visa, make sure you know bring cash and do it there, or if you're gonna do it in advance, because like I had to get mine there, but that's a whole process. And then I also had like one set out for like vaccines and stuff like that, so I was making sure to get all the medications that I needed beforehand. And I talked to my doctor. I thought that was really helpful because I alerted her where I was going and she was able to like do some background research and tell me what things she thought I should bring. And so that was would have that perspective to also draft that list and know exactly what I should bring. Also for knowing my health history did help. And then just generally talking to people who like are familiar, or like I definitely talked to people obviously in the IIC. I talked to former CRP researchers, especially ones who had gone to Nepal, and they were really helpful, like telling me what things I should bring or prepare for. And then just doing research on your own too, and like seeing what you can find online. And I definitely researched the Kathmandu Valley like in general and had an idea of like what things I should do to prepare for traveling, but I didn't know exactly what, you know, each specific area I was going to was gonna be like. So it was once I got there, I obviously learned more about it, and kept informing myself as I was going along and asking questions. But I think it's good to like do your due diligence and be aware of things like environmental factors and like the weather conditions when you're like during that time of year. I went during monsoon season, so I was very careful to bring like a raincoat, umbrella. I didn't really use them that much, but it was good to have in case it did rain. And being aware of like any sort of safety or health things. And again, the IIC is going to be really helpful in talking to you about any sort of health and safety things, but just being aware of those and making sure that you're updated on all of that before you.
So the 2026 CRP students will have a ton of time with Richard, who will guide you through that process of like we're just mentioning, of thinking through the context in the area where you're traveling, thinking safety, working with the partners to figure out the logistics. Just a little bit of background, the reason why Asertio was saying you might not know logistics until later in the semester is because sometimes, well, in all cases, the logistics are based on the research. So in the spring semester, you're designing the research. So you can't really finalize exactly where you're staying and what periods of time until the research is a little finalized. So that's why you kind of have to come in with that flexible approach. Of course, we can give you background on the fact that there's not going to be electricity on all these sites. Electricity, there's not going to be. It's not going to be like Williamsburg. We're not traveling abroad to go to some place necessarily. We can give you that context, but the specific details of when and where aren't finalized till the end of the semester. I want to emphasize that in almost all cases, just because the food is different, the water's different, the environment's different. You're coming off of a plane where people are bringing a ton of germs, or bringing a bunch of germs. Most students in the CRP get sick maybe a couple times, minor things, like diarrhea or vomiting or whatever from eating random things. Sometimes you just, you shouldn't do it, but do it because this food looks good or this, whatever looks so good. And that's okay, that's part of it. And it's, you have plenty of support from the partners, from Richard, from others in the IIC, to make sure that you get the help that you need. We do a lot of vetting on the front end with the partners to make sure we know where the hospitals are if something happens. And you also get, the IIC pays for your international travel insurance. And then you also have, say we recommend that you travel nurses before. All right, I want to ask two more questions and then we will open up to you all to ask questions. How is, after this experience, how is international research different from your preconceived idea of what it is? So thinking back to if you were sitting in this chairs last year, this time, what's different about the experience than what you expected it? The three of you.
Yeah, I think going in, I knew that like I didn't know what I didn't know, and it was gonna be an experience where I was just gonna have to be flexible and open-minded. But I guess I didn't realize how independent I would have to be. And like, yes, you have support from the IC and you have your other William Mary students there, but like things are always gonna happen and sometimes it's just up to you to find a solution. Like you might have to fly alone, which was something I have done before. I had my other student partner there, which was nice, but like sometimes plans change, like we had to book hotels at the end of the trip. And like you just have to know that like things aren't always gonna be super planned out. And that's okay, like you'll figure out a way to make it work. And even like your research, if you have a plan, it's definitely gonna change once you get there because maybe you don't have a car one day, which happened to us a few times, or maybe a certain group of people you're gonna interview can't interview and stuff like that. So I think just like yeah, I knew that it would be a new experience, but I guess I didn't realize that like for the first time I was gonna have to like, okay, maybe try to change a flight on my own. Like I had a scary experience where we almost missed, I don't know if I told you this, Erica, but we almost missed a flight with a layover and had to like talk to people to like cut a line and stuff. So anyway, you have to works out. Yeah, everything works out, but like really taking ownership of planning and being in charge of yourself and your safety. Like yes, you have support, but it was definitely a lot of things that were new, especially because for me in rural Kenya, like there were tourists going in the park and stuff, but like there really were not white people going to the village market. And a few times we went, so there was a lot of stairs and a lot of like, I don't know, people like coming up, and I feel like I'm a pretty friendly person, but just like, knowing where you are and like obviously at the camp with all the people we knew in the organization, it was very safe and fine, but knowing that when you're like at a market and there's people you don't know, like maybe stick to yourself and just being aware of safety and stuff like that. And yeah, like just taking ownership of like what you're doing, being very aware. I guess that was something I didn't realize that to do really well.
I would say I honestly don't think I had many like preconceived ideas about it because I had zero research experience. Like I knew nothing.
And yours was so extreme. Different, like such a remote.
Yeah, it was.
Yes.
And honestly, like that's kind of what attracted me to my program in general, because I really wanted that challenge and to be outside my comfort zone. But I would also say that cause I attended the same panel last year and I listened to everyone talk about, you know, the cultural differences that complicate things and you have to be flexible, because things always change. And I was like, yeah, like, of course, that's so obvious, like, I have to be flexible in my daily life here. But it's just, it's different, and I guess I kind of underestimated, I would say, the cultural differences and the flexibility, and not in a bad way, like, it didn't cause any problems or anything, but it was just something that I thought I understood, but I didn't totally understand until I experienced it, so, and yeah, yes.
I think I also can relate to some extent, like, I definitely was told many times, like, have an open mind beforehand, so I really tried to do that in practice, and having worked on, like, a couple of the semester programs or two, I had an idea of, like, you be flexible during research, because it's not like you're in, like, a simulated, like, lab setting, you're working with real people, so things are going to happen, I mean, life isn't perfect, like, things are going to change, and, like, I think generally we didn't have too many, like, hiccups or things that, like, were offset, you know, there might have been like a couple of days where there was like a protest and we couldn't go out into the field or whatever, but it's, you know, you navigate that and you figure out how to like adapt and like still work around that. But I guess one thing I definitely felt really emphasized, and I think I learned also myself, was that the importance of like self-advocacy and being able to like you know, advocate for yourself when you need it, because like there is definitely like times where like maybe I wasn't doing it, like the best, and it was really important for me to like let my partner know and work with them so that I could still like be like there for them and like, you know, facilitate and do like do what I needed to do for the project, but also like ensuring that like I'm keeping them in the loop and not leaving them out of that. I think it's so important to like have like that close team dynamic to really be able to be honest and open if you're not your top self. And I had one brush where I accidentally ate some raw vegetables and then I just wasn't feeling the best for like a day or so. And like I think just being very upfront with him about that, like helped him support me and me supporting him in the long run too. And then it also just was a great talking point, and I think it definitely eased any sort of tensions from not, you know, because we're meeting like in person for like the first time and maybe don't know each other super well. So that definitely was one way to introduce myself to him within like a week. And it's like since then I've felt so comfortable with the whole team. I also would say I didn't expect to like get so close with the team with at the beginning of the project. And like I mean definitely like we maintained a very professional like dynamic, but also I would say like these girls I worked with are definitely like friends to this day, and I've stayed in touch with them since, and some of them are even in contact with my mom. So you really do make like some really like lifelong, I would say, connections with some of these programs too, and it's really awesome.
So, have Richard reflect on advice for all of you. As you're thinking about doing international research, so Richard, do you have any just general advice for them, things they should be thinking about in preparation for applying for the research program and then specifically for international projects?
Thank you. Right. So let me start by talking about my personal experience. So when I set out to become a researcher, I thought the whole idea was to acquire intellect and knowledge. But then I soon realized that the whole process was about personal development, emotional development. And I realized at some point that I needed to be resilient, because things aren't going to be, that smooth for you as you go through the process. I remember my first international journey was from Ghana to Ireland, and I arrived in winter. That was my first time. That was my first time experiencing winter in Dublin. Very harsh weather, something I had not experienced ever in my life. And right away, while I was dealing with going to the classroom, how to deal with the harsh, cold weather. And that's and that set in motion mental toughness, resilience. It showed me how to deal with, harsh conditions. And so as you set out to, embark on a journey of research, you should look beyond just intellect and look at overall personal development, how you manage your time, how you manage your finances, how you plan. One of the key things I would like to, bring up is that kind of detailed plan, because the things you are going to do are time bound. And it is important that as you go through the planning process, you have everything on the spot. For instance, I was studying at University College Dublin, and I needed to do chemical analysis. We didn't have the facility over there. So I needed to undertake that chemical analysis at Dublin City University because they had a School of Chemical Sciences. It was important for me to make sure that my reagents and everything that I need to do arrive on time, because it was time bound. And so planning was very key, which means that as a researcher, you're traveling outside US to go to a country and return in 8 weeks. You got to think about things that need to go ahead of you. Sometimes things must arrive. If there are some tools, I remember when I needed to work in Ghana, go back to Ghana, I needed to order things from UK to Ghana. So these are the things you got to look through, how you build your resilience, how you see the whole process as not just intellect, but personal growth. And then you develop that kind of mental toughness to be able to withstand whatever you experience. Talking about the personal growth, so whilst I was thinking about intellect, then I realized that I was going to deal with networking with people, getting to know people. So it wasn't just about book. It was about dealing with people and reaching out to people that can help me at some point. I remember I was doing my data analysis and I got stuck in R. I was dealing with a code. I didn't know how to fix it. Then I had to reach to a friend. I think he is a US citizen, Arian. How to look, and I learned he's a R guru. So that is how you go about. So see the whole process as a developmental process for your life. In that case, I urge you to begin to develop resilience, because you are going to move from your comfort zone to a non-comfort zone. The things you are exposed to in US, you get to a place and they aren't there. You get to a place you don't have internet. And you're like, I got to look for this information. And that is where you begin to find a way to handle all those stress. And it helps you to become a better person once you have gone through the process. That's what I can say for now in terms of stepping out into a career of research and building yourself. Thank you.
Open up to you all if you have any questions for the panel.
Right, I came in late, so you might have already touched on these ideas, but you talk about the learning curves that you had and the personal development. Do you find that these things that you learned still impact you now? Yes, great question. You're asking.
Yeah, I think so, because I think kind of a preconceived notion I had was that research has to be super like formal, especially when you're interviewing people. And I think just because we were like living with a lot of the people we were learning from, and also because Kenyans are so friendly, and before every interview would be like tea time, and we would just like chat for like probably half an hour before getting started. And just like I really liked how things were so like personal and welcoming, and everyone said like was always saying like thank you and being very polite, and I think all the things I learned that weren't formally in interviews, just through like talking to people, even like when we were in interviews, just like in car rides, talking to people who were at the organization and learning stuff that was applicable to the project, or just learning so much about the culture. I think it made me kind of realize that research is about connection just as much as it is about forming questions and answers and analyzing data. It's about maybe like learning more about people, letting them tell their story, like Sapani was saying, and you know, these connections you make could come in use like later on in your life too. So I guess I learned about networking from going abroad is what I would say.
I just have to really add to that. Personal story really quickly is that the partners that we got to work with, I met when I was an undergraduate student. It was a long time ago though. And so to Leah's point, those networks extend way beyond your time and as a student. So my experience with those people at that time, they've now become colleagues that I've worked with in different ways, but they become lifelong friends and colleagues that then benefit other people later on. But
I agree. I think, yes, definitely. I'm still affected by how I've learned and changed. And I think, you know, kind of in two ways. The first way being the self-growth that we had talked about. I think one of the things I meant to say for the last question, but I have forgotten, was that I think it also helped me become a bit more assertive and like comfortable in myself. And because you do need that. And that has definitely stuck with me. And also leading the project, like you really do lead the project. And sometimes your partner organization looks to you and they're like, okay, like what do we do about this? And so that also sticks with me. But then also in terms of like conservation career, I guess, for me, it was super impactful because I went into my project a little bit more focused on wildlife, I guess. And I came out of it way more focused on the people. And I think going forward, I have learned that in wherever I take conservation, I want it to be a bit more people focused. And so for me, that has really stuck with me, and I think it will continue to drive my career.
Have said, I would say it's definitely just you, having more independent, I think, and confident in yourself. I definitely am the type of person who's struggled with like being assertive or like, you know, having my own voice and like not so confident. Like this experience definitely taught me like how to have more of a leadership type role and to have like more of a say, and like especially in like the build up to the program, so like, you definitely get like a lot of that when you're like leading meetings and like setting up like agendas and like creating timelines. Like I feel like all that is really good experience that like helps you to feel more confident in yourself even before the international part, and then when you are in the international part, it's good to have that experience because then you feel confident being more of a leader in that situation too. But I feel like I also learned so much from like the communities I was working with and just like kindness and compassion. Like every place I went to, I saw people welcome us with like open arms. They were so welcoming and sweet. I mean, definitely had a lot of tea offered to us at different places, which was amazing. We actually went to like an older folks home too, which was a really cool experience, and all the women there welcomed us with open arms. And when I came, they all wanted to take a photo with us, and like some like even 100-year-old woman like took time to spend time with us instead of watching TV, and I really appreciated that, like because it's a big deal being 100 years old and willing to spend time with these young researchers. So I just felt like that really taught me how to be like more compassionate and empathetic in my own life and try to translate like the lessons I learned from people in Nepal to like the US. And I feel like we all could be a little bit more, you know, friendly and welcoming to the people we're working with. And especially it was nice to see like how research, it doesn't have to always be so formal. Really, I think it's better to almost be a little less formal at times because then you can really connect with people that you're working with and make them feel comfortable to talk to you and have those conversations about what you're researching. So, definitely.
any other questions? So the panelists will stick around until we have 10 more minutes. So if you want to ask them individual questions, you've asked them to, you know, be super honest about things that were hard and stuff. So feel free to come and ask them questions, or you can ask me any questions about the application process. But please grab some pizza and drinks on your way out, and thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. Thank you to our panelists. Wonderful reflection.
And I was like, I know, I was like, oh my god. Like, I'm too offended.